Hey everyone, and welcome back to Unplugged Headlines. I'm your host, and this is episode 16.
Episode 16 already.
All right, time flies.
It really does.
But today, we are taking a deep dive into something you use every day, probably.
Probably every day, yeah.
But you don't really think about it too much.
Hopefully it just works, right?
Exactly, it just works. And that is the world of payments and banking.
The world of payments.
Yeah, it's huge.
It is fascinating when you peel back the layers.
It is, yeah.
And you see what's going on behind the scenes.
It really is.
It's not just about your bank account. It's not just about your credit card.
Yeah.
It's a whole global system. It's interconnected.
It's a whole thing.
It is.
And so to help us understand this better, we're going to be talking about the global financial stack. Have you ever heard of that before?
Global financial stack.
So it's basically a way of visualizing this whole complex ecosystem.
Yeah, I like to think of it like a giant invisible machine almost with all these different parts working together.
Oh, yeah.
And so each layer of the stack represents a different type of player in the financial world.
Okay.
And they all depend on each other.
They all, yeah.
In really, really interesting ways.
Okay, so let's start unpacking this stack. Where do we even begin?
Well, at the very bottom, we have what we call the foundation.
Okay.
This is the regulatory and banking layer.
Okay.
It's the bedrock of the entire system.
It's the bedrock. So
this is where you find the big banks, right?
the big traditional banks.
The ones you probably think of first.
The ones with all the marble columns and the fancy vaults.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not just about aesthetics, right?
Right.
These institutions are all about stability.
Okay.
They want to make sure the system is secure and that everyone is playing by the rules.
So they're the ones providing clearing all the transactions.
Massive volumes of transactions.
Yeah, and setting the standards for compliance.
In compliance, yeah.
So they're kind of like the referees of the financial world.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
They're the referees, right?
Making sure everything runs smoothly.
Keeping everything in check.
Yeah.
We're talking about institutions like the Federal Reserve.
Right here in the U.S.
Here in the U.S. or the European Central Bank.
Yeah.
You know, these are the big players.
The ones you hear about all the time.
The ones setting monetary policy and making sure that the financial system stays afloat.
Right, yeah. The ones you hear on the news all the time.
Exactly.
But it's not just national banks, is it? This foundational layer, it also includes those global payment networks, right?
Absolutely. Think about networks like Fedwire,
Okay.
which handles a huge number of transactions within the U.S., or SEPA, which streamlines payments across Europe.
Okay.
These networks, these networks connect everything.
So they're making sure the money's moving quickly and securely.
Quickly, securely.
Between banks.
Between banks all over the world.
Wow. So it is kind of mind-blowing.
It is, yeah.
When you think about all the activity going on.
Behind the scenes.
Every time we just use our card or send money online, who knew?
There's a lot happening.
But what about those other services?
Yeah.
Like if I wanted to exchange currency.
Right.
Or do an international transfer.
Right.
Where do those fit into all of this?
Well, that's where the next layer comes in.
Okay.
The licensed non-bank providers layer.
Okay.
This is where things start to get a bit more interesting.
Okay. All right. So
you'll find money service businesses here.
Money service businesses. So MSBs?
MSBs, the ones that handle those currency exchanges.
Okay.
International transfers you mentioned.
So if I wanted to send money to a friend in another country, I'd probably be interacting with someone on this layer.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's not just MSBs. You've also got electronic money institutions.
EMIs.
EMIs and payment institutions.
Payment institutions. PIs.
PIs.
So many acronyms.
I know, right?
But they might sound a bit technical.
They do.
But they're essentially the companies behind those e-wallets.
Yeah.
And online payment platforms that we use all the time.
All the time.
Ah, okay. So they're offering those specialized services that kind of go beyond what your typical bank might provide.
Precisely. They're building on that foundation laid by the big banks.
Right.
But they're also innovating, offering new ways to manage and move money.
So thinking about things like cross-border transfers.
Yes.
Microloans.
Microloans.
Or even I've heard about those super apps.
The super apps.
In Asia that kind of combine everything.
To combine everything. Payments, shopping, investments.
It's crazy.
It's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
It is.
How this layer, though, it relies on that first layer.
Yes.
Those foundational banks.
Right.
To actually make everything work.
Right. They need that established infrastructure.
Yeah.
And those compliance systems in place.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
So they're kind of...
They depend on that underlying framework. for
Right.
liquidity
Yeah.
and regulatory compliance.
Okay, but it's not a one-size-fits-all?
It's not, no.
Like, the regulations governing this layer,
It can vary
they vary
quite a bit,
region to region.
region to region.
Yeah.
For instance, you have PSD2 in Europe,
Okay.
which sets specific guidelines for EMIs and PIs,
Mm-hmm.
or Singapore's Payment Services Act,
Right.
which has its own framework.
So it's kind of like they're all playing in the same sandbox.
They are
But with slightly different rules,
slightly different rules depending on where they are.
depending on where they are.
Okay, that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the top layer of our global financial stack,
Okay.
the one you probably interact with the most.
Right.
The app
The apps and platforms.
and platforms.
This is where things get really crowded.
This is where it gets crowded.
Yeah, all those fintech startups,
All the fintechs
payment facilitators.
vying for our attention.
It's like trying to pick a coffee shop in a city with one on every corner.
It really is.
You got it.
And just like with coffee shops,
Uh-huh.
each one is trying to offer something unique
Yeah.
to stand out.
To stand out from the crowd.
But here's the catch.
Yep.
These players at the top,
Uh-huh.
in what we call the distribution and application layer,
Okay.
they don't actually have banking licenses themselves.
So how do they manage to offer all these financial services
It's a good question.
if they're not actually banks?
They partner with the players in those lower layers.
Okay.
They integrate with their systems and leverage their infrastructure.
So they're kind of building on the backs of those more established institutions. right?
Exactly.
Okay.
They're focused on creating user-friendly apps and platforms
Right.
that connect to the existing systems.
Okay. That makes sense.
And that's where we see a ton of regional variation.
Okay.
For example, in Latin America,
Uh-huh.
you have startups specializing in local payment methods like Boleto in Brazil.
Boleto in Brazil. Okay.
In Africa, many fintechs are building on the success of mobile money platforms
Right.
to offer things like savings and microinsurance.
Yeah.
It's really a fascinating landscape.
It sounds like it.
It is.
We've got this amazingly complex system.
We do.
Layers upon layers.
Layers upon layers.
Of these financial players.
all working together.
All working together, but with so many players.
Yeah.
Especially at that top layer.
Yeah,
It must be tough for a business.
it can be.
Or even just a regular user
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
navigate.
it certainly can be.
Like, how do you choose?
But that's where understanding the global financial stack becomes so valuable.
Okay.
It's like having a roadmap
Right.
to this intricate world.
Okay.
It helps you see the connections,
It's dependencies.
the dependencies,
And ultimately make more informed choices.
informed choices about the financial services you use.
That makes sense. So we've got these 3 layers,
3 layers.
each with its own unique role to play.
Each one is crucial.
But how do they all work together to actually ensure that this whole system is secure
Yeah.
and reliable? That's what I'm really curious about.
That's a great question, and it's something we'll explore in more detail
Okay.
as we continue our deep dive into the global financial stack.
All right. I'm ready.
Stay tuned.
Let's do it.
It's funny, we often take for granted that when we swipe our card
Yeah.
or send money online,
Right.
it just works.
It just works magically.
But behind that simple action,
Yeah.
there's a whole web of trust and security
Right.
that has to be in place.
Yeah, because we're essentially entrusting these companies with our money,
Exactly.
our hard-earned money.
Hard-earned money.
We need to know it's safe
Right.
and that the system is protected
From fraud.
from fraud, from abuse, all of that.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's where compliance comes in.
Compliance,
It's
right?
not just about having a cool app
Right.
or a slick payment solution.
Right.
It's about making sure that every player in this stack,
Yes.
from the bottom to the top, is
Yeah.
playing by the rules.
So what kind of rules are we talking about here?
What are the big things that these companies need to be mindful of?
Yeah, what are the big ones?
Well, some of the most important ones are anti-money laundering,
Okay.
or AML,
AML.
and know your customer
HT?
KYC regulations.
Okay.
These are designed to prevent things like money laundering,
Okay.
terrorist financing.
Oh, well, that sounds serious.
It is serious stuff.
Yeah.
But how does this actually work in practice?
Yeah, especially for those smaller players at the top,
Right.
like those fintech startups.
Exactly.
They might not have huge compliance departments.
Yeah, it's a great question.
So how do they do it?
Even the smallest fintech needs to comply with these regulations,
Okay.
and they often rely on their partners in those upper layers,
Okay.
those licensed banks and non-banks,
Right.
to help them navigate
Okay.
these complex requirements.
So it's kind of like a chain reaction.
It is.
Like the foundational banks set the standard,
Right, with their rigorous compliance programs.
and then the licensed non-banks, they build on that.
Right.
And then finally, the companies at that distribution and application layer.
They have to demonstrate that they're meeting those same standards,
Right.
often through their partnership.
Through their partnerships. Okay.
Precisely.
Okay.
It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Those foundational banks have been doing this for a long time.
Right.
They have the expertise.
The system's in place.
The system's in place.
They know how to figure it out.
So it makes sense for those newer players to leverage that existing infrastructure.
Rather than trying to build it all themselves.
Exactly. Right. From scratch.
Okay, that's really interesting.
It is.
So when I'm using like a fintech app on my phone, I'm actually benefiting from the compliance measures that have been put in place by those big banks.
You got it.
Even though I might not be interacting with them directly.
It's all interconnected.
Yeah.
And the level of scrutiny and regulation, it varies from region to region.
It does.
In places like the EU or Singapore,
okay,
where financial regulations are incredibly robust, you'll see application layer entities relying on things like compliance APIs.
Wow.
Sophisticated monitoring tools to ensure that they're ticking all the boxes.
So technology is playing a big role in all of this.
Absolutely.
Helping these companies stay compliant.
In a rapidly evolving landscape.
Yeah, because things are changing so fast.
Things are moving fast.
Yeah.
But it's not just about technology.
Okay.
It's about partnerships and collaboration.
Okay.
The smaller players often rely on the experience and guidance of those established institutions.
To make sure they're doing things the right way.
If they're doing things right.
So it sounds like maintaining trust in this entire system really depends on everyone working together.
It does.
From those big banks at the foundation to even the most innovative startups at the top.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Each layer has its own unique role to play.
Yeah.
And when everyone understands and fulfills their responsibilities, the whole system benefits.
This global financial stack concept really helps to paint a clear picture.
It does.
Of how it all works.
It provides that clarity.
It makes you realize just how much is going on.
Behind the scenes.
Every time you make a payment.
Every single transaction.
Check your bank balance.
It's a reminder that even the most mundane transactions have a story behind them.
It's a whole network.
A whole network of players.
Working together.
Working together to make it all happen.
To make it happen.
Seamlessly and securely.
Speaking of stories, with all this innovation happening in the financial world, how do you think this stack might change in the future?
That's the big question.
What are some of the big trends?
What should we be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It really is a dynamic space.
It feels like every day there's like a new fintech app.
There is.
Or a payment solution popping up.
Yeah, the financial world is changing faster than ever.
It really is.
And this global financial stack is going to have to adapt.
So what kind of adaptations do you think we might see?
Any predictions for the future?
Yeah, any predictions for the future of money?
One thing I'm really excited about is the potential for greater financial inclusion.
Financial inclusion.
As technology becomes more accessible, more affordable, we're seeing more and more people around the world gaining access to financial services for the very first time.
That's amazing.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
To think that people who previously couldn't even open a bank account might now be able to access loans, savings accounts, and all sorts of other financial tools.
That's incredible.
It's truly transformative.
It really is.
I agree.
Yeah.
It has the potential to empower
individuals.
Individuals and communities in incredible ways.
Yeah, but with that opportunity comes responsibility. Right?
Absolutely.
You need to make sure these services
are safe, reliable, and beneficial for everyone.
Yeah, we need to be mindful of
things like predatory lending. Data privacy. And the potential for these technologies to exacerbate existing inequalities.
That's a good point. Yeah.
We don't want to create new problems.
It's not just about building the technology.
Exactly.
It's about building it responsibly. And making sure that everyone has a fair chance.
A fair chance to participate.
Yeah.
And another big challenge will be navigating the constantly changing regulatory landscape.
Because it is changing.
It's a moving target.
Yeah.
As this financial stack evolves, regulators around the world are working hard to find the right balance between fostering innovation and protecting consumers.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
It's a tough job.
It is a tough job.
It's like a constant game of catch-up.
It is.
Technology is always pushing the boundaries.
Pushing the boundaries.
Of what's possible.
And regulators are trying to Keep pace.
Keep pace, yeah.
That's a great way to put it.
And that's why it's so important.
For all the players in this ecosystem.
From those big banks.
From the big banks.
To the smallest fintech startup.
The smallest fintechs.
To work together.
To work together.
And engage in open dialogue.
Open dialogue with regulators.
So collaboration, communication, key to ensuring
they are key.
That this whole system,
this global financial stack,
continues to evolve in a way that benefits everyone.
Absolutely. It's about finding solutions.
Solutions that promote innovation, but also maintaining that stability. Security, fairness for all.
That's the goal.
Wow. This whole conversation.
It's been a journey.
It has. It's been incredibly insightful.
I've enjoyed it.
We started by asking, how does money even move around the world?
Right. Such a simple question.
And we ended up exploring this fascinating
and complex
global financial stack.
Who knew?
And I feel like I have a much better understanding of how it all works.
Me too. I hope our listeners do too.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even the most mundane transactions have a story behind them.
They do.
Whole network of players.
Working together to make it all happen.
Making it all happen.
Seamlessly.
Securely.
So next time you're paying for your coffee.
Or sending money to a friend.
Take a moment to think about all the layers.
All those layers.
Of this invisible machine.
Working behind the scenes.
To make it possible.
It really is quite remarkable.
It is.
And as technology continues to evolve.
Yeah.
It's going to be fascinating to see
how this stack adapts and transforms
in the years to come.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what the future holds.
Me neither.
And thanks to you, I'll be watching it all unfold with a much deeper understanding.
You're very welcome.
Of how it all fits together.
Glad to be here.
And to all our listeners, thanks for tuning in to Unplugged Headlines.
We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive
into the world's most interesting topics.
We'll see you then.